Welcome to the Retirement Made Easy podcast. I'm your host, Greg Gonzalez. My goal for the podcast is to help you live a better life in retirement by giving you the tools and information you need in a language that you can understand. And this week's episode will be no different. This week's episode is episode number 12, which I have entitled, How the 2020 Presidential Election Could Impact Your Investments and Your Retirement. This seems to be the question that everybody has. Over the past few months, I've been having review meetings with a lot of clients, either via Zoom or over the phone or in person. We're finally back to in-person meetings here for the folks in St. Louis. But the number one question I'm getting is, what about this presidential election? What is going to happen to the stock market and my investments if Biden gets elected or if Trump gets reelected? These are the concerns that a lot of folks out there have. So I put a lot of ideas and research together for today's episode, which will help walk you through and give some insights on the 2020 presidential election and what that might mean for your portfolio, your retirement, and your investments. Before we get into today's episode, I wanted to remind listeners to check out our website, which is retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. And while you're there, you can check out our free resources, such as my retirement secret sauce, as well as our 2020 tax planning guide. So check those out. Again, the website is retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. So let's get into today's episode. What the 2020 election is going to mean for the economy, the stock market, your investments. We are living in a very interesting time in history. I don't think anybody can argue with that. This whole coronavirus epidemic has really shaken up not only our economy, but also the stock markets and the job markets. Practically life in general has been a huge adjustment for most people in our country. So I want to start off with some information, some facts that we do know. I've done a lot of research, a lot of digging. The first article I wanted to mention, which was extremely interesting, was done by JP Morgan Asset Management, and it's titled, How Will the 2020 Presidential Election Affect Markets? It's dated January 14th of this year. And in the article, it states, this is very interesting to me, since 1932, an incumbent, in this case, President Trump, has never failed to win a re-election bid unless a recession has occurred in their time in office. Well, with this pandemic, President Trump has a recession during his time in office. Although it is a extremely odd recession, it is still a recession nonetheless. The JP Morgan article goes on to say that history strongly favors the incumbent. Nearly 3/4 of sitting presidents have been reelected, dating back to 1932. Those are pretty good odds for a reelection for President Trump, if history is any guide. And I will argue it's the only guide we really have. The next item that this article, which was published by JP Morgan Asset Management, and I have always heard this statistic, it says that historically the S&P 500 volatility has typically been higher in election years than in non-election years. But if we look at last election, 2016, with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, we all woke up the day after the election and saw Donald Trump had been elected. We were all surprised. And of course, the market was surprised as well. And that's why you saw so much volatility in the market. So what this JP Morgan article is trying to tell us is expect a lot of volatility around election time or between now and election time or even after the November 3rd election this year. This JP Morgan article then went on to say, historically, markets tended to react more positively immediately following the election of a Republican president due to the fact that the Republican Party policies are broadly thought of as more market-friendly. So what that means for us is if President Trump is reelected, if history repeats itself, you might see a more immediate positive impact on the stock markets in general. Mark Twain once said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. So there's no telling what's going to happen, but if history's any guide, and it's the only guide that we truly have, you might see that occur again. The next study that I found absolutely fascinating was done by research affiliates. The authors are Rob Arnott and Vitaly Kolesnik. These two gentlemen sought out to answer the age-old question of, does the market perform better when we have a Republican president or a Democratic president? The study was absolutely fascinating to me. And what they found was that there's no persuasive relationship between the political party in power and the actual stock market returns. They looked at history and they found that the stock market does perform better when there's a Democratic president. However, during the Great Depression and the stock market crash of 2008, the big financial collapse, there were Republican presidents in office during the Great Depression and the 2008 collapse. However, they found those two gigantic recessions, the Great Depression and the 2008 financial crisis, if you remove those two sets of data from history, they found that there's no persuasive relationship between the political party in power and the stock market returns that we all experience. So those 2 points in time or points in history really swayed the results, and taking those out, there's no clear evidence that we experience higher stock market returns when a Republican is in office or a Democrat is in office. So no matter what your brother-in-law says, these researchers were not able to find any clear relationship there. The next article that I wanted to mention in today's podcast was done by Michael Townsend, was the author. It's titled Stock Market Performance in Presidential Election Years. It's dated May 22nd of 2020. What he found was very interesting as well. Something that I knew was that the third calendar year of a presidential term ends up being positive a whopping 82% of the time. And if we think back, President Trump's third presidential year was 2019. The market was very, very positive. It had a wonderful year in 2019. Mr. Townsend also went on in this article to explain that stock market returns are influenced by more factors than who's in office. He went on to say that stock market returns are influenced by business cycles, corporate profits is the huge factor that he mentioned, and globalization. Now, corporate profits, that's what really drive the market in general. The better companies do and their earnings, the better the market's going to do overall. If earnings go up and up and up and earnings are exceeding expectations, man, the market is really going to thrive. You saw that in 2019. The economy seemed to be running on all cylinders. Unemployment rate was the lowest in 50 years, and companies were just making money hand over fist. So no matter who's in office, these companies are run by some of the best business leaders, business minds in the world, and they're going to shift and pivot no matter what policies are put in place, no matter what the tax rates are. They're going to make adjustments so they can thrive in any environment. The next point Mr. Townsend brought up in the article that was that when there's an incumbent party running, and in this case it's President Trump, if you look at the stock market in the 3 months preceding the election, so that's August, September, October, if you look at the S&P 500 in the 90 days, the 3 months preceding the election, if they were positive, the incumbent party was elected 87% of the time. What that means for us, okay, if August, September, and October are positive for the S&P 500, President Trump, according to history, has an 87% chance of being reelected. So President Trump is probably crossing his fingers that the stock market is up in the 90 days prior to the election. The election this year is on November the 3rd. Only 13% of the time has that not been the case. And it's sort of like a recency bias if you think about it. The whole, what have you done for me lately? That dictates, does the incumbent party deserve to be reelected? Looking at the current state of the market, the economy, and everything else. Now let's shift gears and talk about what if Joe Biden is elected president? What's that going to do to the market? Well, of course, we don't know. No one has a crystal ball. But one thing that I wanted to mention, and this is published in an article August 17th of 2020 by Brittany Delea, Delea. This is in the show notes. So Brittany compiles a summary of Joe Biden's tax plan that he is proposing. He wants to raise taxes on the high income earners across America. So check this out. It'll be in the show notes description where it lays out this whole article. Brittany does a fantastic job of laying out all of the proposed changes that Joe Biden has come up with in his proposal. There are a few that I wanted to highlight, that some that I really strongly disagree with and I think would be a terrible idea. But the first thing that I found interesting was that the Trump tax bill, also known as the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, it reduced taxes for not only corporations, but also individuals. And so Biden's tax proposal really repeals a lot of the changes from the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, meaning it moves it back to the way things were. So the top income bracket would be 39.6 instead of where it stands today at 37%. Also, Joe Biden wants, or his plan anyway, is to have high income earners, the top 1%, which is interesting to some people. It's $400,000 and more. So if your AGI is $400,000 a year or more, you would be in that top 1% high income earner category. Biden also mentions that he wants to increase the tax on corporations from where it stands today at 21% to a 28% level, so increasing that 7%. So I analyzed all these different proposals in Biden's tax proposal, and it seems like to me, and this is just my opinion, my take on reading through this summary, that Biden really wants to hit the wealthy and also wants to increase the taxes on those that are inheriting money from loved ones, from estates. So what he's going to do is essentially increase the amount of estate taxes. It used to be called death taxes, but that wasn't politically correct. So essentially what in Biden's plan here that I'm reading is he intends to have more estate taxes for more individuals by bumping down the exclusion limit. And then also, and this one I am strongly opposed to, he wants to get rid of the step up in basis upon death. Let me explain this a little further by giving you a concrete example. So the way the law stands now is such. Let's say my father bought an Apple stock. Let's say he bought a lot of Apple stock a long time ago, 20 or 30 years ago. He paid $10,000 for this group of Apple stock. Let's say my father passes away. The $10,000 worth of Apple stock is now worth $100,000. And let's say I'm his only heir. Let's just make it simple. I'm his only heir upon his death. I inherit the Apple stock, now worth $100,000, and I get a step up in basis. So now I inherit the $100,000 of Apple stock from my father. I inherit it at a basis upon his date of death. So whatever it was worth on the day my father passed away is now my new basis. So if I wanted to sell it a month, 2 months later for the $100,000 that it was worth the day my father passed away, I would pay no capital gains at all. So versus if my father would have sold it before he passed away, again, he paid $10,000 for it originally. It's now worth $100,000. So he would have $90,000 of capital gains, and he would pay capital gains taxes, long-term capital gains taxes on it. So a strategy that we use with clients, and a lot of people use, is the step up in basis. So they hold the asset until their death, and then their heirs will essentially inherit it at the basis, whatever it's worth, when mom or dad passed away. Maybe it's your aunt and uncle, you inherit it, and then you can sell it shortly thereafter and pay no capital gains taxes. So that's the way the law stands now. The same applies to farmland. Let's say my father bought a farm, an 80, 100-acre farm for $50,000 a long, long time ago, and now he passes away. It's worth $300,000, and I'm his only heir. I want to sell the farm for $300,000. It would get stepped up to the value at his date of death. I would inherit it with a basis of $300,000, meaning I could sell it 6 months after my father passes away for $300,000, and I would pay no capital gains taxes. And in Joe Biden's proposal, he wants to get rid of that, meaning whenever I inherit the asset, I would inherit the farm with a $50,000 basis. So my capital gains from that sale would be $250,000, and I would pay capital gains taxes on $250,000 instead of nothing. You might be able to tell it in my voice, but I am strenuously opposed to doing away with the step up in basis upon death. For those that inherit money from loved ones, from family, friends, you name it, they're going to be paying a lot more in taxes if something like that ever got passed. The final point this article makes is that the Tax Policy Center estimates Biden's tax proposals would increase federal tax revenues by $4 trillion between 2021 and 2030. So big increase right there. So I wanted to next address the question that I've been getting a lot lately, which is, should we bail out of the market with the anticipation that Joe Biden is going to be elected president and the market is going to tank and our investments are going to tank with the stock market? And my response to that is, I never recommend abandoning long-term investments for short-term speculation. Short-term speculation is maybe it's a new president. Maybe it's the price of gold going up and up and up. You don't abandon a long-term portfolio to jump in something short-term based purely on speculation. Joe Biden may not be president. Trump may not be reelected. We don't know at this point. And another thing, I am not a fan personally of jumping in and out of the market. There was a study done by Putnam Investments. It's called Time, Not Timing is the Best Way to Capitalize on Stock Market Gains. It looked at 15 years between 2005 and 2019. And what this study found was they assumed somebody invested $10,000 in the S&P 500 index back in 2005 and just let it ride. Didn't do anything crazy, just stuck with the investment for the next 15 years. Their return annualized was 9%. Their $10,000 turned into $36,418. They next assumed that someone got antsy and was jumping in and out of the market and missed the 10 best days of the market during that same period. And this next person only had a 4.13% return. Their $10,000 only grew to $18,358. So what the study tried to show is that you're best off letting time work for you and not trying to time the market. There's a lot of studies out there on all the people who have failed trying to get in and out of the market and trying to time it. Most people would tell you it can't be done, and I'm one of those people. So I would not recommend letting something like a presidential election dictate how you invest your long-term retirement savings. The market did extremely well when Ronald Reagan was president. It also did extremely well when Bill Clinton was president. You may have not liked one of those presidents, and that's okay. But as long as your long-term goals haven't changed, your long-term portfolio probably shouldn't change either. I hope today's episode was helpful and informative. To listen to other episodes, you can check out our podcast website, which is retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. Download our free resources. Send me a message with your questions. Until next time, remember, always dream big. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, please consult your attorney, tax advisor, or financial advisor prior to investing. This is a hypothetical example and is not representative of any specific investment. Your results may vary. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices mentioned are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. The SmartVestor program is a directory of investment professionals. Neither Dave Ramsey nor SmartVestor are affiliates of St. Louis Retirement Advisors or LPL Financial. There is no guarantee that a diversified portfolio will enhance overall returns or outperform a non-diversified portfolio. Diversification does not protect against market risk. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA, SIPC.